Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Strip by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia. I am a digital content creator based in Vancouver, Canada. I am also a stripper. I am dancing all week, and I'm literally running on a couple hours of sleep because I worked last night. Yay! But also really grateful to be working right now. So I was also a former sugar baby many moons ago, and I run this podcast because I really want to help destigmatize the sex industry. And I think the best way to do that is to really share the lived experiences of sex workers and stories to kind of paint a realistic picture of what our life really entails, and not like crap that you hear on TV. So that's just a little bit about me. Obviously, this podcast and this episode is not about me. I really want to be able to give today's guest a platform to share their story, because what they're going to be telling us today is extremely vulnerable and so courageous and so brave. And I just want to give a big trigger warning before we get started and before our guest officially pops on to the mic. I want to say that we'll be discussing the big topic of human trafficking today. So trigger warning on that. It's a huge topic. The whole episode will be like that. And if this is a trigger for you, feel free to skip this episode. I won't get offended. I'm looking out for those who are listening. So if this is not for you, please skip starting now. So I am bringing on today's guest, who I connected with very recently on Twitter. Last week's episode, we were talking about privilege in sex work, what that means, and this person shared their story with me and told me a couple things on their story, how they were trafficked at 16 as a young teen, and I was like, oh my gosh, this deserves its own episode. And it was like we were like messaging back and forth for quite a long time. So many messages, so many paragraphs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you need to come into the show. So I'm finally bringing on Brandi Wood onto the show today. Brandi is a full-service sex worker based out of Buffalo, New York, who's currently on hiatus right now. And I'm very happy and honored to share her story today. And she is patiently waiting on the other side of the mic, nice and quiet. Brandi, are you there?
I am. How are you? Hello, everybody.
Hello. So happy to have you on, and thank you so much for calling in today. It's 8 o'clock my time, and on the West Coast here, it's almost lunchtime over there, so I'm going to just try to be really wary of your time today. So thank you again so much for coming on today to speak with me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is a huge episode, and I had put a tweet out to see, okay, what questions do we have here? And there was an overwhelming response that came in. There's lots and lots of questions that came from Twitter, lots and lots of questions that came from Instagram. So I really I've basically shaped the episode with all of the questions that everyone has submitted here. Thank you everyone on Twitter and Instagram for submitting all these thoughtful questions today. We're going to get through it all. But Brandi, before we get started, would you like to tell the audience who you are and what it is that you do? Who are you? Who is Brandi Wood?
That's a big question that I'm still trying to figure out. But I'm 37 now. I just got back into independent sex work in 2017, so almost 5 years. I started when I was very young. I worked in a massage parlor from 16 until 21, and then I worked at a county hospital in between. Mm-hmm. I got sick and went back to sex work, and I realized, as stigmatized as sex work is, mm-hmm. I've met so many amazing people, amazing sex workers, amazing clientele that you never would have crossed paths with otherwise. Yes. We've all had some crappy situations, but the benefits have outweighed the pros, even though my story isn't really the best story where I am now. I'm happy to say I'm here from getting involved with what I'm involved with. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, did you want to get started with your story in terms of how you were trafficked? And I just want to allow you to take the floor there.
That's yeah. It's like not really like a big the actual happening of the story isn't really a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we get it out of the way and talk about it afterwards. Because I mean, basically, it was like my cousin was working at a massage parlor. Her older sister got her the job there. Her older sister was working. My other older cousin, but I was closer with the younger cousin. And then the older cousin got me the job there and was like making money off me working there for years. They didn't know. I was asked to there like it was my choice, but I was 16.
Right.
Well, you know, it was like money, of course, but I didn't realize that I was being, you know, exploited in any way.
Absolutely. No, totally. And like, again, like we have so many questions here, which will really, really shape the episode. But I mean, when you're 16, you don't have that choice.
It happens a lot more, I think, you know, on a smaller scale, like my story with a friend or with a family member, and you don't realize it, and then it's such your normal that you don't like get kidnapped and sold on a stage like they tell about in stories or something.
Yeah,
you know, like, totally. That's what everybody thinks of when they hear of it.
No, absolutely. I think a lot of people have
like to this day, my own family will be like, "You didn't get trafficked. You did that on your own," you know, stuff like that. And
right.
It's like, okay.
That's like totally gaslighting, because as you mentioned, like, you know, people have this stereotypical view. As you mentioned, like, people are getting kidnapped and like thrown on the back of a truck, or like, you know, kids in like Southeast Asia getting kidnapped, or like Eastern Europeans. Like, those are all really, really, really stereotypical pictures of what we think trafficking looks like. But I think people forget that this happens like right in our backyard, and it's pretty prevalent in North America. So Brandi's calling in from the United States. I'm here based in Canada, and we do have a lot of human trafficking cases here, but unfortunately we don't really get to hear about them too much. So a question, like, I guess to kind of kick everything off, is what can human trafficking look like?
You know, it's so funny. It can just look like an everyday anything. I call it a family business. Like, my whole family, my sisters are strippers, my cousins work in a parlor, everybody, like, it could be anything. It could look like any normal family situation. There's really no way to look if you think something seems strange, or why does this person all of a sudden have money? That would be, you know, I had nothing. I came from a very poor neighborhood, single family or single parent family home, you know, and all of a sudden I was like 16 years old. I was like, I'll pay for that. I have a car. I have this, you know.
Yeah.
Nobody questioned. Nobody. And my mother knew about it, but didn't really like she knew about it, but she still won't talk about it. We don't have a relationship now. But I wouldn't even know. You know, I recently heard over here that there was a big sting too. We don't hear about it a lot here, but I've been arrested as a full service sex worker, not when I was younger, and they always slapped trafficking on. I know you didn't want to get into that yet, but you know,
we'll get into it eventually.
Yeah. You know, they will literally like cherry pick ads and say, "Oh, well, we thought you were being trafficked." They followed me around for 2 years until they caught me, and he told me, they're like, "We've wasted so much money on you." The guy himself told me, because we wanted to find you and talk to you. And I was like, "Well, now that you know me, will you leave me alone?" And he basically said yes, but I guess that's what they do. They just pick and look to arrest and everything like that. So I don't even know how you would be able to intervene before you get to that point where it's too late.
Yeah, I'm like, we'll chat about that too, in terms of like what if interventions are even possible, because as you mentioned, like, this is so dangerous too. Yeah, and that too. I was like, when I saw that question come in, I was like, oh, this can be like really, really, really risky. But we'll get more into that later on in the show. But yeah, I guess this person, in terms of like what can trafficking look like and stuff, I mean, there's so many different forms. Like, it can really just, like, a big part of it, I would say, is like largely motivated by like financial gain, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Did you want to speak a little bit about that?
I mean, yeah, I don't know how to really, it wasn't even like I had my basic needs, but you know, when you're getting older and you want everything and you want all the coolest stuff, I kept myself in high school, even though I didn't live at home, and I went to high school while I was working, and I did all that. And I just wanted to keep up with having everything. Yeah. And not like be hungry every day. And so it was all financial. Like, and I didn't have a parental structure. Not that I would probably have listened to them say, this is wrong, don't do this. I don't know if I would have taken it that way. But it's just a matter of, you know, knowing your kids, talking to your kids, and then the financial thing on top of that. Everybody, it's survival. It was survival sex work back then, and even now, there's times where it can still be a survival sex worker. I'm still working to pay my bills.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
It's. I feel like in this pandemic too, I've seen so many people turn to it. So
100%. Yeah, we've had like a whole like mini series on how different sex workers were kind of coping, especially like last year when it was really like we were deep in the thick of it, of like how other sex workers were trying to survive, and they've had to pivot or get into online work when like they were all in person. So like we've seen the shift. We've seen a shift, and some people, have not gone back to in-person stuff. So,
right.
Which is another topic, but we're going to go back to you. I love tangents here. I'm very guilty of doing that, but it's all good. But somebody was asking, and I'm sorry if I'm not calling out everyone's specific handles. There was just an overwhelming amount of questions, and a lot of them were phrased similarly. So some listeners were curious about, like, what are the signs, if there are any, if someone's being trafficked? Like, are there signs? Is there any telltale indicators that we can watch for?
I mean, I don't think that there's really anything specific that you would think of that we don't already know that would be stereotypical. Mm-hmm. Somebody not speaking up if they're with somebody, or acting like, like say you're with your handler or their handler. I was very fortunate. I worked with I had like a madam who was a wonderful woman. Like, the situation for a bad situation was a great situation. Mm-hmm. But it's so individual. I don't know how you would even be able to tell it's with the handler, or how they act, how the person copes themselves. Sometimes They wouldn't even act any different at all. Ask. That's all I can say. Talk to people. Talk and Absolutely. Try to gain people's trust if you're worried about it.
What about in your specific experience? Like, I'd love to hear more about, like, your situation, because we can definitely speak to that. Like, we can't speak for anyone else's unique situations, because everything's like on a case-by-case basis. But, like, feel free to divulge in any details with your story. We'd love to hear that.
Well, like, do you mean as of signs, or just how it happened, or what are we talking about now?
Both, yeah, both. Go into it. Go off, girl.
Well, yeah, like I was saying, I was about 16, turning 17 when I started. My older cousin, who was like a sister to me, I ended up moving in with her when I moved out of my mother's house. Mm-hmm. And, she started working there. She was making money. She's like, I got this great place you can work. You make a lot of money, blah, blah. That's all I got to do. It was just like a massage parlor. Yeah. Still standing today. It's in a old, like, duplex house. I drive by it all the time.
Yeah.
My old mother, may she rest in peace, Susan Chung. She was great. She took care of us, but, and I feel I didn't even realize how big such a small decision I made that day was. Yeah. Like, I had the choice. I mean, I wasn't forced or dragged in, but I made the choice to go. But I mean, I'm very open. I've always been a very open person. So I'm like, hey, random friend, I have this job. You want to come make some money? Hey, other random friend, I got this place where we can work. Like, I've gone back and apologized to everybody. I was like, if I ever, felt like I pressured you to get into this, mm-hmm. They were like, no, I did that. This is all when we were over 18 too. Mm-hmm. But like, one of my very best friends, and I'm so grateful for this. I got her into the business, and mm-hmm. she ended up having a daughter who has special needs, and she's nonverbal autistic, and she's been able to do dom work and helped her stay home.
Yeah.
And take care of her daughter. So,
Amazing.
Like, when I realized to go back, I don't even know how it hit me that I was trafficked. I think I was just in a random conversation with my cousin when she was talking about all the money I used to make her, and she used to refer to that, and then I finally asked her. Yeah. And then I was like, oh my God, did I make somebody feel this way by bringing them in? I felt like I was, how I felt, and then I asked everybody that worked with me, and everybody was like, no, nobody stuck it out. Nobody, except for the one that I just talked about, has stayed into the business, and I'm sure a couple of them were like, it's not for everybody.
No.
But I don't even know where I was going with that.
No, that's okay. Like, I was like really curious, because you were quite young when this happened. You were 16. Like, of course, yeah, you chose to go there, but you did not, like, when you're that young, like, you don't really know what's happening. Like,
Right.
you just think like, ooh, an opportunity to make money. Like when I was like 15, 14, like that's when I started working like at a bakery. I was like, oh my gosh, like I get to make my own money. I get to buy my own things. Like that's what you think of, and it's the excitement. But like, I don't think you are really aware or attuned at that age to know what kind of work you're going into, and you're going into adult work.
Right, and you don't realize how it can affect your whole life for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and the way that your cousin phrased it, it's just like, oh, like I have this really cool opportunity to make money. Like it's so casual in that sense. Like how could you have known? So
when I came back independent and I chose Brandi Wood as my name, I got that name from our most popular girl there was Brandi. So it was like a joke. I was like, what am I going to name myself? You go through that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's like, I didn't talk about it after when I went into city work for 10 years. I closed that chapter of my life, didn't talk about it, denied it, didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I'm like, why? What am I hiding? I'm alive. I'm fine. And I'm here today. So why am I, you're always going to have people that are like, oh, you did this, you did that. I still do. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't hide anything else. Why am I hiding this part of my life that was so big? Because I still talk to all the people that worked there besides the madam that passed. I had made some really great friendships, and I really did have some good experiences. And I really didn't feel unsafe in the building or anything like that. It was just a bunch of girls and an older Asian lady, so it's not like we had security. But
yeah, I'm really curious, like, were the working conditions like completely normal? Like you mentioned, you didn't feel unsafe at all. Like tell us about that, like the normalization of it all.
I'll even when I hang up with you on here, I'm going to send you a picture of I even have a picture of the building because it's still up. It's a regular house. It used to be a bar. So downstairs, she had like a hot tub, but nobody ever really used it downstairs. And you'd go up the side door, and it was just like a regular apartment. We'd all hang out in the living room. She made me play rummy with her 24/7 with all the cards. I don't know why she played with all the cards. I always remember that about her. And there were just like 2 rooms in the back. But it was kind of basically like you would think. The client would walk in, and we'd sit there like cattle, and they'd pick who they want to see.
Oh, okay.
And then we'd go in the back with them. And they still have places like that in Buffalo, but a lot of them are only staffed by Asian women now. I have not heard of any that have American people anymore. Like back 20 years ago when I started, there were a lot more.
Interesting. And that's like, that like kind of caters to like that stereotypical view too. When you think of massage parlors, you usually think of Asian women.
Right.
And that's like a whole nother topic too.
We definitely ran by, she was such a wonderful woman. She looked like Mrs. Swan from Mad TV, if you ever saw that. She wore like a leather vest. I could still hear her voice when she would answer the phone and talk to people. She was the greatest woman, but I think she would kick some ass, so I think we were protected a little bit. But she would have a couple people come in that were her friends that you could tell had been in business for a while, but mostly, I'm sure you probably had probably an episode about this, but it was all like young girls or girls that are established.
Yes.
It's always like people want new faces, young faces, so you can push boundaries, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's another story too. I'm curious to hear about like when your cousin was like telling you about this amazing job or this amazing opportunity to make money. Like, did she ever tell you what kind of job it was? Like, I'd really love to hear if you can recall like your first client, what was going through your head. Like, were you nervous at all? Did you know what you were doing? Did you know that this was
I have a good one for you. I remember, okay, well, I'll tell you, it was such a casual story. She was like, she told me what they were doing, and it was basically like happy ending massages, and I kind of thought it over for a second, saw the money, and was like, I'm down, let's go, let's do this, But I remember there was one time we had police come in because they were they were trying to shut down all the places. Yeah. And for some reason, Kim, we called her Kim Susan, she picked me and she was like, you look really innocent, you go and, just rub this, couldn't say massage because it wasn't technically a massage, go rub this guy, blah, blah. And I'm talking to the guy and he got like, he had a scar from being shot in the back and he said he was a businessman and I'm just like trying to talk with they kept trying to like goad you to do more and and I remember they picked me and this other girl. I was terrified. I probably had to be only like, I think I was 17 because I did lie and say I was a year older even though it didn't matter because I was still underage. I don't know why.
Still underage, I was gonna say. Like,
I have no idea why, but like I don't really necessarily remember my first But I do remember it becoming just like commonplace. I didn't do full service there. There were some extras sometimes, and Kim tried to tell us not to do full service there. I don't know if that was her just saying that because she wanted to say that, she had to say that, or if other girls, but I'm sure they did. But I was, I think she was trying to protect us.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it just like got to the point where it was all the same. It was like I think I blocked it out of what was going on because I was so young, I didn't even know. I mean, I had a boyfriend at the time for 4 years, so it's not like I was really knew what I was doing.
Totally.
To the extent of what I was doing it.
Absolutely. Like, you don't know the extent of what you're doing, what type of work this is, and what that entails. Like, did your boyfriend at the time know what type of work you were into? Yeah?
No, but he found out.
Oh.
And we did end up breaking up. He's still a good friend of mine, and I apologized to him a million times about it. And he's like, could have just told me. You could have just told me. Great man. But I was like, how could I have told you when I couldn't wrap my head around it myself? It wasn't that I was hiding it from him. I was just like, I could totally keep this separate from my real life and somehow still function, which, you can never do that with anything.
No. And that's like where the exploitation kind of comes from, though, too, because like, when people are recruiting these young girls, like, they don't know what they're getting themselves into.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it could be a day, it could be the rest of your life. They have no idea. And it's like affected my whole family. I don't talk to my family. Like, when I got arrested here, we can go into that really quick.
Sure, yeah. Let's just
what
go
we were going to talk about in the other episode was, like, this guy, I have no idea why. I actually called him out recently. I grew up with him. Never have I had, like, an issue with him. I probably hung out with him 5 times. He posted my mugshot and my charges on my personal Facebook.
Right, yes. Okay,
me.
This is how we got connected with this doxing story. Yeah. Yes.
So there's they make you take down your hair. I look insane. And then it says, there's my name, Yvonne, prostitution. And he's like, really, Yvonne? What the fuck? And I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Sorry.
No, of course. Swear away.
My friend Mike is in the car, and he's like, because the police take my phone. They took my phone every time for trafficking investigations. He's like, I need your Facebook password. And I was like, why? And he's like, some people are just not being so nice. And I was like, what? My poor born-again aunt in Florida had to find out that way. She doesn't talk to me anymore. So I, after talking to you about it, I never confronted anybody, and everybody found out. Like, I worked at the county hospital. Yeah. I went to the county jail. One of the old hospital police was the sheriff. He sent my mugshot to the hospital. So when I got out,
oh my God!
Not only did that guy dox me, the sheriff guy told everybody I used to work with in the ER. So when I got out, like 3 people asked if I was okay, and everybody else just told me about myself, how they heard, what they thought of me, et cetera. And it was just like, I withdrew and I hid from everybody. I didn't acknowledge anybody because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say, to who, to what, to where, which I'm glad I did that because now I've been able to go and pick the right people,
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that.
You don't need everybody to accept it, just the right people.
No, like, why the fuck would these people do that? Like, and why would the sheriff do that? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I know. It's just like, it's drama. People love to hear drama, or it didn't match with what I was projecting, when I was saying earlier how...
Yeah.
I mean, I worked in the middle of an inner city ER. I knew cops, I knew everybody. I was going to nursing school. I was doing everything, and like, everybody just knew who I was, so it didn't match up to what I was putting out there. And nobody can reconcile that. I'm still the same person. I always was the same person. I did it before you knew me, I did it after you knew me, and I'm still probably going to do it for as long as I can, But nobody... I don't know. I don't know why it seems like sex work is so hard to swallow for everybody. I understand why, but it seems like still, even with this terrible, swerves that we have, it's so weird. Like, it's such a weird hill to die on to me.
That's like another topic too. But we do discuss that in the podcast too. But yeah, like steering back to where we were earlier, a lot of people are kind of like, I guess people were assuming, and again, this goes back to that stereotypical view of what we think trafficking looks like. But some questions that came in, they were like, how did you get out of your situation? Tips on survival, or what was your key to survival? Because I know you mentioned you were working in the massage parlor for 5 years, was it? So from 16 to 21? Yeah, was that just in the massage parlor, or like did you at that point start transitioning into full service?
I actually took a civil service test, and I ended up getting a county job, and I just left. Yeah. But then I worked there for almost 10 years, and then I went back to sex work after that because I hated working. I was like, I'm going to last 10 years in a civic job, and that's it. And I made it 10.5.
I don't blame you.
I wasn't kept there. I wasn't, I could come and go as I please.
Mm-hmm.
We even had, like, I'm trying to think of, like, survival. It was just, like, it was before I had a car of my own. So we had a cab driver. It was before Uber. So we had the same cab driver lady that would pick me up, my girlfriend, around the block and, pick us all up and bring us there. She'd pick us up and we'd be dropped off at 10.
Right.
We got picked up at 6. And, she knew what was going on. But she was, like, one of the people that knew but didn't say anything. But was always like, I'm here if you need anything. Kind of like those people are what kind of kept you going. Because, you wake up some days and you're just like, I don't feel like being around people. And in our type of profession, you have to be around people in the most intimate way.
Yes.
And there's days where you don't want anybody even to look at you, much less touch you or want you to touch them or whatever the case may be. Absolutely. But I think it was just like having friends in the business and with you, like, if I get out of the room, I'd go play rummy with Kim or something stupid, and that just like getting out of your head is how you survive. But I mean, I always say, I was fortunate in my situation. Some people don't have the chance to get out and leave as they please or not go to work if they don't want to that day, so
totally.
I can't really speak on that.
That's okay. Like, I was wondering, like, when was that point where you no longer wanted to work at the massage parlor? Like, what was that was there some kind of breaking point, or was you're just like, I'm tired of this, I want to change, and then maybe try to work in a civ job? Or can you take us back?
It was my county pension. I got a 10-year pension. I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do forever, and I'm terrible with money. I don't know how to save it. Mm-hmm. So I said I was going to work for at least 10 years to get some sort of pension.
Wow.
And then I did. And I was going to go to nursing school. I got 3.5 semesters in, and I just realized how much it's not for me.
Yeah. Not a fit.
I love taking care of people, other than, being a sex worker. And it's so funny when I say this, being like going to nursing school, working in the hospital, being a sex worker, and I was like a nanny. I was always taking care of people in some sort of way.
That's a trend. Yeah, I could see that.
And this one, sex work is the one. I'm so glad now that I'm like singing about it, because that's the one that I feel actually like encapsulates me. It explains me as a whole. I feel myself in the position. You know what I mean? Like I could be me 24/7, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And when you want to talk about trafficking court, I got arrested. Yeah. January. Okay, so I was so dumb. I started on my own, independent. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. July 4th, 2017. So by January, I was arrested because in my brilliance, I stayed in the same hotel for 6 months. Okay, I had no idea what was going on. Didn't know you're supposed to like move around and stuff. Yeah. And so I got put in a human trafficking court, and the judge in Buffalo, her name was Judge Martocci. She's now in the Supreme Court, but she was amazing. She started trafficking court. I think here in Buffalo it was started. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, not positive, but I think it was one of the first, because her sister was an addict, and I think she was an escort, or she had something in sex work. And Judge Martocci was the kind of person who'd be like, "Why are you in jail? We don't want to put you in jail for this. You're not, Yeah. They try not to put the charges on us. Like, I did end up getting a B misdemeanor prostitution charge, and I'm going to get taken off my record now. I don't know why, they just offered to take it off, so I'm like, sweet, go ahead. Mm-hmm. If I don't care, it's a misdemeanor. I was like, whatever, just put it on there. But, and there's the lady in the court, her name's Alicia. Shout out to Alicia, she's amazing. She hooked me up with this place called International Institute of Buffalo, and they work with refugees, trafficked people. And I have a caseworker there who I still work with, even though I don't necessarily need her as bad, but I work with her, and I say I work for her because they have me now doing, like, I don't know how, like, they kind of have me doing, like, the peer support for people that won't reach out to them because we don't trust anybody. Mm-hmm. I was telling you yesterday, in the hierarchy, I work with Marissa from the International Institute, I work with Alicia at the court, and I was like, Alicia, nobody's going to call you, they think you're a cop. And she was laughing, and I was like, well, it's true, like, you're a cop, you work for the court, you're a cop, sorry, I can't, any other way to say it. Yeah. And she's like, well, I appreciate that, because, I'd rather you guys go to Marissa, because she can be confidential, whereas sometimes I can't. But, like, and they were so excited about this this podcast. I was telling them all about this because they're like, we want you to come work with us and do all this stuff. But they're all going to start listening, they said, too. So I'm excited about that.
Hello. Welcome.
I wish what I wanted to come out of this is, like, I wish that we, in our community, without having to go to the courts and everything, knew of the resources that were available for us. Like, with SWAP. SWAP is amazing. We
Yeah,
have another
tell us
amazing
about
one
that.
in
Like,
Vegas. That has been so wonderful. It's called Sex Work Aid Vegas. And she's not. I think her name's Summer. I forgot her last name. She's on my Twitter. She's amazing.
sure.
And they were doing mutual funds over the pandemic. They were doing like Instacart gift cards, and she's not even a real charity or anything yet. She was just going off donations and doing out of the kindness of her heart. And that's what I noticed is our community is the most giving, the most wonderful, and that's why I want to stay in it.
Absolutely.
And I know I'm jumping everywhere, but
no, that's okay. Let's get it back. So going back to like resources, like as a whole, you mentioned Swab. Can you tell us a little bit about that and like what kind of resources that you know are available to you now, but maybe you wished you had access to before?
Well, I mean, there's so many things I couldn't even begin to tell you. Like Swab Kit offers, they have help with people with addiction help, housing help, food, just any sort of prep or STD testing and condoms, anything like that. They were doing mutual funds over the pandemic. They were like they help with everything. They Swap Behind Bars helped me get my apartment. They offered to give like $250 towards your like security or whatever, and it's $250. Why not? They're so helpful.
Yeah.
My only problem with them is that there's only one in New York, and they're based out of New York City, where everybody thinks New York City is New York when it's the tiniest little borough over here. So,
not the rest of New York.
Nice if we had one, because we have a very, very big sex work population in upstate New York. Between here, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, even Utica, Elmira. I know girls. We've all kind of, even despite not knowing each other or not knowing each other's faces. We know each other. We watch each other's backs.
Yeah.
And you probably know how it is being in the business. Mm-hmm. And, I don't even know where I was going with that again.
Yeah, we're talking about regionality, too, and, like, not having enough access to resources based up in outside of New York City. And this is a theme, too, that's not just only in New York, but also, like, so many places around the world. Like I was doing research for the Youth Coalition for this conference that was up in Paris earlier this year at the United Nations Women. Basically, when I was conducting my research, there was a lot of pushback in terms of like we aren't able, like as sex workers from around the globe, that they weren't able to access resources because of where they lived.
Right.
Like that to me is just so wild to me. I believe like resources should always be accessible, whether it's in person or even just online. But some of these countries, like African countries and some countries in like Europe, just didn't have access to that based on where they lived. And that to me is so basic.
Buffalo here and me working in the inner city hospital, I never in my entire life had heard of the International Institute of Buffalo, and I mentioned it to one of my older family members. They're like, oh yeah, I used to, like in the 70s, I used to translate for them. So I'm like, this place has been around forever, and I've never heard about it. Why?
Yeah.
And I think it goes along like the stigma. You don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it.
Even like, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. Totally.
I had, I want to say I think it was the University of Chicago. Somebody did an interview with me a little bit earlier this year, and she was asking that the big question she wants to ask is, how do we get information out to sex workers so you guys know?
Yeah, that's another question that we had too.
Tell us to tell others. Like, we're not going to all sign up and show up somewhere. We're not going to do that. We're not going to listen to anybody. It's like word of mouth. That's all it really is. Is you have to hear about something from somebody you trust when you're in the business for you to trust it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we have had quite a bit of those questions that have come in too. So some specific questions that people on Twitter had asked was like, how do you provide support to workers to protect them from the risks of abuse within the industry? Yeah. Do you have any comments on that?
I mean, I'm trying to think of like as a whole, but I don't know how you would even like, I think now everything, like, that's why I was saying, even telling my story now is the time people are finally listening to people's stories. The misogyny hopefully the tables will be tipping a little bit more now that people are really speaking out. But as far as like protecting and stopping and like hindering, I really have no idea how you would even, everything is so ingrained in society as women that we just do, we listen, we shut up, and even if we don't like it, we do and go along to get along. It doesn't matter. that, you know, you had the people that get mad that were owning up to it and taking it back for ourselves. At the same time, the same person would be mad if we were doing it in silence and not telling anybody, because then that makes us a bad person because we're not putting our lives out there. So there's really, like, it's always a case-by-case situation.
Oh,
It's like you have to literally try to look at it that way.
Like, as you said, like, as women, we are so conditioned to behave in a certain way that, like, okay, we're not going to say anything here, or we're just going to keep doing what we're told to do, because, like, that's how, because of fucking patriarchy, you know, that's like how we have been groomed in society. And as you mentioned, like, it's so nice to finally, and so refreshing to hear that people are finally speaking out against these atrocities that happen. And this is why I bring people like you onto the show to share your own experiences, to show how normal this is.
And it's gotten kind of funny, like, it might sound kind of bad, but, like, I have a wonderful, wonderful husband, but, I'll be talking to him, and sometimes he'll be like, Yvonne, you don't need to get into it and tell everybody your whole sex worker life story. They don't need to know. Like, I like to think about it now, and I'm like, and I'm a fucking sex worker, and what? You know, like, before I would be like, I don't want to talk about it. Now I'm like, well, excuse me, but, like, you know, I mean, I feel so, like, privileged, like, when we were talking about that, like, I can be faced out. I'm fortunate. I don't have children that I have to worrying about my reputation later. Like, I was terrified that it happened to me the way it happened to me, but it lasted maybe an hour, 2 hours, and then it was just like I was in a jail cell, so that was scary. But I was like, oh my God, the relief was like gone. You know, I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. It's like I wish that more people were able to, you know, own it. And why does it matter? That's what I always ask. It's like, you know, at one point, when my picture got sent to the hospital or wherever, everybody's talking about it, the first time I got arrested because I ran from that court and those people, and I was a terrible person for a while. But I was like, why is my vagina so important to the city of Buffalo at this moment? You know, like, what does it matter? Why? You guys don't care about what I'm doing, not for money, so what do you care about what I'm doing for money? But, again, it's how everything's ingrained. I don't, you know, that's something that's not going to be answered, I think, in our lifetime. We could just try to work towards and not being as bad.
I know we kind of talked about this really early on, but we didn't get into the details. But another listener was wondering, like, would sex work been an option for you if you were never trafficked before?
I don't know. I would say probably in some way with me, because, like I said, my sisters, they used to be strippers when they were younger. So there was always, it was always in the background. But I don't know if I would have went to it, like, straight up independent on my own full service. Here I am. You know, I don't even know if that would have even crossed my mind. Yeah. But, like, there's a large amount of people, and I have a lot of friends in Buffalo too that I didn't even know were working until I was working. So you get surprised. There's a lot more than you even know about.
Yeah, for sure. Like, is there, I wonder, and this is just an observation or maybe an assumption that I'm making, but, like, do you find any kind of comfort in sex work because it's already something that you are familiar with?
Oh, of course. You know, you always go towards the familiar, and, you know, in full service, we do have people that we don't want to see, or we have our favorite clients, we have our regulars. Yes. And I've been around, you know, a couple of years, so I'm fortunate enough to be kind of picky, choosy on who I see. But, you know, you come out green, you learn. You have to go through the bad things. And, you know, again, I've been very fortunate. I have not had a lot of, knock on wood, bad situations. I've had some, but, you know, not as terrible as they could have been, and as terrible as I've heard. But, you know, I think it's almost imperative for you to have, like, a sex worker friend who understands in some way, too. Like, I just had a friend of mine pass a couple weeks ago, Lily. I think I told you about that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm so sorry.
Rochester. Yeah. Then we have another friend out of Rochester, and she didn't know. I messaged her because I didn't even know Lily's real name. Mm-hmm. You know, we can know so much about somebody, but you don't even know their real names. Yeah. So I messaged the third party friend, and she had no idea. And now her and I got really close because it's like, she's like, she was my only sex worker friend. She was crying, and I was like, well, you know, she would want us to be friends. Like, it's just to have somebody that knows what you're going through. Yeah. That's like so necessary. Absolutely. Just somebody like at any job where you could bitch about your boss, or, you know, whatever you gotta do. It's like that.
And that's why I think, like, our community, like, sex work in general, and, like, sex work Twitter and everything, like, I think it's so great because, like, I don't know, like before, like sex work is like, I mean, it still is very taboo, but as you meant, like as we're discussing here and how we've seen like on Twitter and stuff, like there's so much support there, so much support online. So super, super grateful to be part of this.
Jump into any I love all sex work Twitter. That's like my favorite thing.
It's the best. I love it. I'm just
I sit there and I laugh and everybody's like, "What are you laughing at?" None of your business. But like people literally will just jump in and talk and be kind, and that's why I think I don't like any negativity of any kind. I think that's most people. I like to hope don't either. But like our community, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you're from. Like I've noticed, other than stupid class issues that we have sometimes. Mostly everybody is extremely helpful in any way. And I think that's something that I notice as like a lifelong sex worker, is that we're just so used to helping, and we want to help, we want to change, we want everything. Like we don't want people to go through the bad things that we went through. So if we can help somebody not, or learn how to do something a better way, we tend to do it.
Totally. I know we had mentioned this off the air earlier, but a question that came in from another listener was, do you recommend any kind of intervention, if any, for those who have suspicions of someone being trafficked? I thought this was a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think it would be like we said, a case-by-case basis. Like, I don't know if there would be a safe intervention.
Yes.
Like, I even tried to tell the guy that ended up outing me how if it weren't me, that could have been dangerous for me or him. He wouldn't listen. So, you know, it would just be like talking to the person. I don't even know how you would notice, you know, signs unless you were alongside the community already. Like, you know, when we watch shows now, or you watch something and I'll be like, oh, that person's a sex worker, or that person killed a whole bunch of sex, you know, stuff like that. Like you would tell because you notice signs. I've been alongside the business for 20 years. You could see it now, but I don't think you would know unless you were there or you knew something about it beforehand. Like for the lay person that, like, you know, say a teacher that, well, I'd say a teacher probably know better. Like they should know to look for things. But just like a regular job person that doesn't think about sex work being an option, I don't think you would know what to look for, except for maybe like that withdrawn kid, that stereotype. But other than that, I wouldn't know what else.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to relate this to like abuse situations, but like sometimes in trafficking situations, people are abused. So I will mention it here. But like, you know, there are some like telltale signs of like, okay, like where did this person get all this money? Or if they're absent from home, or if they're coming like home late, or coming home at odd hours, if they're being unusually quiet, like signs like that, like can be signs, but like, it's a really, really fine line that like you kind of want to tiptoe across, because you don't want to make the wrong assumption, right?
Right. It could be signs of anything else, too, you know?
Totally.
But I was thinking about when I did get arrested and I went to jail, the whole lineup was sex workers of some sort. A lot of them are addicts. And this girl, who I still know today, she talked about how she like had a pimp, and she would always use like quotation marks. And I'm like, well, explain this to me. I'm like, why? What's the point of this? Yeah. And she's like, pimps these days aren't like pimps that we know about. Pimps these days are basically like what she said, and I loved her phrasing, was a dope boy with an idea. So it's like a drug dealer who knows somebody needs the drugs. They see this person makes a lot of money, so they travel with the girl, supply the girl with what she needs, get her money, and it's not usually a volatile situation. Don't want to say always, but you know, that's like they're there just to serve the girl, and the girl is doing her work, getting the money, and then the money goes back to the guy. So I understand it, I guess, in that sense, if you're a drug addict, because I was like, why would you be giving, like, why do you need to give your money to a third party? But the way that she explained it, I was like, oh, okay, I could see that a lot, and it made more sense to me that way, because I never understood it, you know?
Yeah, and like, speaking of pimping, we are going to be speaking about that next week, which is going to be another heavy trigger warning topic as well. So, I mean, those situations can like go from like 0 to 100, because like a lot of the times, like the women are being pimped out, and then like all their money goes back to whoever's pimping them out, and like you'd be surprised at like, again, the normalization of it, like what can seem normal. Like it could be a boyfriend, it could be a family member, it could be someone close to you in your circle, and not just, again, like what society paints the image of like what a stereotypical pimp would be, right? But yeah, like we'll be going more detail on that next week, which I'm excited to talk about as well. But going back to you, Brandi.
Sorry.
No, you're all good. I just really want to make sure the focus is all on you and your story this week. Another great question I think that came in was, how can sex workers be allies and to help support those who are currently trafficked or have been? And this person wrote on to say, we often share spaces, physical, non-physical spaces, or like, for example, like traffickers will use the same sites to advertise on, possibly use the same hotels. Like how can we be allies in providing support in those situations for those who have been trafficked?
There was like a period of time where I was in between houses when I was living with that same cousin before I moved here. I was living in a hotel, and I was able to kind of spot after a while, like maybe the people that I thought were, being pimped. But I think a lot of it was more along the lines of, the way that I explained it versus being, trafficked as a whole. Like, she probably wouldn't tell anybody to get arrested to do it themselves. But, you could kind of tell people are never alone. It's really hard to approach somebody.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's just like knowing the signs and trying to get somebody to trust you, or just try to be trustable or be available for somebody in that sense, which, how do you even do that? It's case by case again.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like even the stories you hear about people getting away from horrible, horrible situations, they escaped themselves. They did it themselves. It's not like anybody really ever gets rescued. The police don't help at all. I mean, with me, I had to go into trafficking court, and they had me going to court every day. I had to check in every single day. I had an 8 p.m. curfew. It was like completely ridiculous. I'm like, I'm 33 years old. I'm not doing this. Like, no way.
Yeah.
So I kept, I was on the run. I had warrants for 2 years, and they would just keep picking me up. I'd go to jail for a week, and I'd go back out for a couple months till they found me, and I did my 60 days over 2 years. Don't recommend, 0 out of 10. Nobody ever do that. But, and like even the court liaison, Alicia, that I was talking about, she was like, we hate having to arrest you. That's why we were like, you needed to go to court, because over me getting arrested, I lost everything in my house because I got arrested when I was moving. So the U-Haul was got taken, so then I got to the point where I lost my apartment, then I lost like all my family and friends. And then the last thing, I lost my dog. Like I had my dog living in a hotel with me, and that was completely horrible of me to do, but it was my dog, and it wasn't how I started out. I feel like I was completely irresponsible at that point, but what was I going to do? And then when I went to jail, I had registered my dog to somebody who said, if anything ever happens, I'll get him out, because I knew that I was not, it was a chance. And then the person claims that I didn't even know that the dog was in the pound, which was bullshit. But, that was finally, that was like the final
straw.
Even Alicia in the court was trying to get the dog out for me. I was like sitting in my jail cell, like, I need my dog. Like I had other, all these other inmates were trying to make calls for me and everything. But they realized, I think, like, arresting the girls are not, it's not beneficial. It's good to get people away, and then if there is something that's horrible, terrible, you tell about some sort of like raping, abuse, something, it gives you a safe space to do that. But for run-of-the-mill people, it generally like screws you over even more, because it's taking every last thing that you have.
Yeah.
And then I remember there were times where I would leave the jail, no phone. They take my phone, so it would just be like me and a pair of shower shoes walking down the street. They don't give a when they discharge you. Like, I wonder how people get picked up and get into this, like when they're getting out of jail. And the court liaison, they used to tell me, the judge used to do trafficking court and other court things, but she would do trafficking on Tuesdays. I never saw it, but they told me that like traffickers or pimps or whoever, they would come and they would like sit in they call them pews, I don't know what they call them in court. And they would just intimidate. They would stare at like the people, they would try to intimidate, they would pick up new girls. And I was like, really? Like, I mean, city court down here looks crazy, so I don't think you'd really even notice. But like, I was like, I can't even imagine. And it happened to me kind of, the fact that it's still rampant and still surprises the crap out of me around here. Like there was within the past couple of years, a bigger ring was caught over here of like underage girls, and I was like, wow. And the guy, I think it was a drug addict, drug dealer situation, but the guy was only like 22 himself, and he had a couple like 16, 17-year-olds, and he's at a hotel on Niagara Falls Boulevard out here. And, it's kind of funny because people know in Buffalo, stay away from Niagara Falls Boulevard. It's like a sketchy area if you want to leave.
Really? Oh my God, I was just there. I just got not there in the States side, but I was there getting engaged, like on the Canadian side. So, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really nice. There's a little stretch of an area kind of by like this mall that's finally being sold, made into apartments. So there's a bunch of little hotels near the airport, and they're just like, don't work out of those hotels. The cops are crazy there, and everybody knows it's just like the sketchier area. There is like one main street in the area. Oh, there's probably two now, I think.
Yeah.
Where they let streetwalkers. That I didn't even know either until I was in jail. Like, I didn't realize how many people were still out on the street.
Yeah, there's still quite a bit of people on the street.
I've helped a couple people get off because I'm like, why are you doing that when you could just sit at home on a phone, on a Wi-Fi, that's so unsafe. I knew this girl, may she rest in peace, Tiffany. She got headbutted because she wouldn't see a guy for free, and he knocked all of her teeth out.
Oh my God.
And she was like 24 years old. Beautiful girl. And it's like, what? I mean, and she had drug problems, so a lot of those reasons are the reasons why people are out on the street, but I couldn't even, like, those girls are so brave. I can't even imagine what they have to deal with and oh my God. It's like, because we'd always be in there talking, and I couldn't, like, there's so many people out there still. It's like everybody always says, if you're in Buffalo, go to Broadway, go to Grant Street. We were doing a joke, like, where to Broadway, which is on the east side, and Grant Street on the west side meet in Buffalo, and they say the holding center. That's like the joke that goes on.
Wow. But, yeah, like I did an entire episode on street walking here in Canada and what that looked like here in the West Coast, and like why this particular person, who's also on Twitter as well, shout out to Vanessa, shout out to her, why she had chosen to keep doing that for as long as she did before moving into full service work. But again, like for that situation, and you all will have to listen to that episode. It's a really popular episode. She just chose to do it because like of the person who introduced her to that. So like in that kind of case, she's being pimped out. Yeah, and familiar, and just being pimped out, and she's like, well, what else am I gonna do to get this kind of money at this age and stuff? So, which is like it's a wild story. It was amazing. Oh my God, such a good episode. Go listen to that, everyone. Going back to you were talking about human trafficking courts. Oh yeah, I forgot to ask earlier. This other listener was asking, like, if you happen to know, but what do the courts require in order for you to get charges dropped?
I don't know. I'm actually going through it right now, so I don't know exactly what I have to do yet. I can get back to you on that.
Yeah.
But it was when I went to International Institute of Buffalo, which is, my caseworker Marissa, she went through a whole list. They have a whole list for their, like, I hate when they say they're girls, but that's what they call us. And it's like, oh, well, did you go to neighborhood legal services and they'll take off any prostitution related or trafficking related charges? Like, had I gotten arrested with possession or, something else, they would remove that too. I guess it's just anything that falls under the trafficking court. I don't know how they decide. That's a good question. I'm going to have to ask them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I wonder if, what were we saying too? Because you mentioned earlier when you were telling your story too, like you had a number of mandatory things that you need to do with the court liaison. Like you had mentioned a couple of mandatory things for you to get out.
Yeah,
so do you want to speak about that?
They like to lay eyes on you every day. They like to see you.
Yes.
You have to check in at 8 o'clock and send your location from a smartphone. Like they just want to make sure that you're okay. They can't unless they see you, they talk to you, which I understand that. Like even recently, one of the court people reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you find this girl? I haven't heard from her since February." And she's like, "I don't want you to tell me where she is. I don't want to know anything about her.
Yeah.
I just want to know if she's alive."
Yeah.
And I reached out to her and I was like, "Hey, I just want, I'm reaching out to you on behalf of da-da-da. I'm not going to tell her anything you don't want me to. Can I tell her you're okay and that I spoke to you? Or is there anything you want me to do?" I understand why they feel that they need to lay eyes on certain people, but at the same time, I can see, like, people without cars, how do you get to court every single day?
Yeah, it's
at
tricky.
a certain time and make sure you're home at a certain time. Like, I think it shouldn't be as rigid across the board for everybody because everybody's not in the same situation.
Totally. I never thought about that.
It's relatively new here. I think it's only like 4 or 5 years old, though, so it seems like they're trying to change, and they're like, we need and they're starting to work with us. They're like, we need to hear your side of the story. We want to hear because your input is so paramount to everything that happens. We don't know. So you tell, like, they want me, and I'm weird about this too, but they want me to talk with Homeland Security anonymously, and I said I would think about it. I don't think to work with the police.
That's a little scary, but yeah.
Yeah. But she was like, somebody reached out to me from Homeland Security, and they want to hear some stories, and you came to mind, and I want to know if you thought about it. And I'm still thinking about it because half of me is like, somebody's got to do it, and the other half is like, these are cops. But
I was thinking too. I was like,
twist their narrative no matter what.
Yeah, I was like, red flag, but I mean, the choice is up to you. So it's cool that they thought about you, but like also like terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, and she was one where, of course, me, I always go head first. I don't even think about it. I'm like, sure, go ahead, tell my name, call me. She's like, I think you should do this anonymously. I think
so too.
And I was like, you're right. And another lady I was talking to yesterday who works at the International Institute, she's like, okay, well, if you're going to train them, you're going to get $83 like everybody else does an hour. And I was like, hey, I like the way you think. But, I was like, I don't think I'm really training them. She's like, she's like, if you're going to put yourself out there, you should be compensated for it.
Yeah, you should absolutely get compensated.
It does make sense, but I mean, I'm still on the fence about it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it just because, they never listen to us. It doesn't matter. They're not going to, I don't think my story, even if it does, I don't think it's going to affect them to change their like the policing ways, how deep and dark that goes,
Yeah, that's another dark
But the more
rabbit
people
hole.
that do, I keep trying to think about that, like the more people that do talk about it, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start closing out here, but there's a few more questions that I would love to chat with you about too before I let you go. But another question from the audience from Twitter asked, how do we educate people that consensual sex work and sex trafficking are not the same thing? We are largely treated the same way in terms of criminalization.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, that goes back to, again, I just said the misogyny. And a lot of it, even in the misogyny, it's like internalized misogyny. It mostly comes from other women.
Yes,
it does. And I cannot explain. I cannot explain it. When I would get anybody looking at me in some sort of way for being a sex worker, not even knowing that I was trafficked, since I just started talking about it, it was always other women. And I don't even know how we would begin to untwist that. How many years ago was it that we were just marrying whoever we were told and sit down, shut up, and make dinner?
I know.
I think we're kind of going in the right direction as long as we start talking about it amongst ourselves. But
exactly.
Like I said earlier, I don't think it's going to be a big change in our lifetime, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is why I have this podcast. Like, talking amongst ourselves is great, but I think we need to start educating the masses and educating like civ people. I think that's really important, and to normalize this kind of conversation, to normalize this kind of work. And that's where I feel like this show is helpful in many ways. At least I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think this is helpful.
Awesome. I think it's amazing. I was looking yesterday when I was looking at all of your titles, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be listening to you for years.
There's a large catalog.
That's like exactly what I figured out what I want to do. I was like, I was talking about starting a podcast with my girlfriend that just passed a couple weeks ago, because I was like, I talk about this to so many people. I said, I never told my story. Why don't I tell my story to the world finally? I'm always been loud like that, so I'll do it that way, and if it helps anybody along the way, that's amazing. That's all, that's all I want.
Yeah.
So I think it's so cool how you got into that. It's so big and so awesome. I'm surprised I didn't hear about you before we started talking.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
I have been doing this for about just over 2 years and a bit, like a couple months. But yeah, it just started off as like a random thing that was like, a client at the club, I work at a strip club, and they were just saying this is strippers are really cool, and for me, they have their own lives, they have all these different stories, and I'm like, yeah, we do have all these stories. And then I
because they're really big ones, right?
Well, what I thought was really important was because I've done so many different types of sex work, I was sex work in general is really fascinating and often misunderstood. So I just felt like it was my duty to tell people on what it actually is and on how it usually is. So that's a little bit about how I got started. But yeah, there are bonus episodes on that. You guys can listen to that. I don't want to detract anything away from you. But I wanted to also ask you just a couple more questions or a couple more, statements that we can end on. But kind of looping into what we were just saying, like you just never know who is listening and what kind of situations that people may be in. And another question was, I guess the last question was, do you have any advice for someone who is currently being trafficked?
No, I mean, but that's like hard again to say because again, it could be a very unsafe situation to try to leave.
Yeah, totally.
Try to get your footing, to try to tell anybody you have no. I mean, it could
blow up.
It's up in his death. So it's such a very, very delicate situation for each person.
Absolutely,
it's so hard to say across any baseline, like this is what you should do. Like I was always thinking, I think like airports, they have look out for trafficking. I would love to sit in on one of those and see what they teach people, because I can't even admit, like I can imagine like the stereotypical things we talked about at the beginning, like watch out for the quiet person that's not allowed to talk or whatever. But I'm interested in like what they teach flight attendants, what they teach people to look out for, because even I, being alongside the business or in the business for 20 years, I wouldn't even know what to look for.
No. And like I work for, like I have a fun job and I work at a hotel like part-time, and like they have like quote unquote training for that too, especially like during like Super Bowl, because they're like a lot of girls get trafficked during Super Bowl on flights and like get checked into hotels, so you have to look out for, and then I'm not sure if this is even effective, but like they were like signs that I mentioned earlier, like if they're really quiet, if they're usually accompanied by an older man or like another gentleman that is the only one speaking for them and stuff like that, or if they have like little to no belongings and stuff. So like it just seemed like really vague, and I'm just curious to hear, like, is this actually really effective in like showing some like signs? Like I don't know, I'm also curious about that.
Out of hotels, and she could tell me like something weird happens. She's like, I leave all my belongings and go to a whole new place. So that's a good one that you say about like look for people with little to no belongings. Yeah. She's like, I could live out of a suitcase. Stuff is replaceable. You are not. Leave. I'll leave all my shit there. I don't care. Yeah. And I was like, it's a good way to think about that. And then with me, with losing all of my worldly belongings I collected for 30 some odd years, I realized how little we can really live with and how much we do have on a regular basis. We don't need probably 90% of it. Totally. So that is a good one that I didn't think about. Yeah,
I mean, just little things like that. Like I'm curious to see like what they also look at the airport and stuff like that. But anyways, all good here. I know that you mentioned, and you've said this before, like sex work saved your life. And I know like we were chatting off the air earlier, like you only really realized that you were trafficked just up until like a couple of years ago. So like, do you want to speak a little bit about that in terms of like closing notes?
Well, I mean, it was like a known thing with me, but it was kind of like we joked about it, but I never really like sat down and, I took talking to other family members to find out that one of my family members did benefit monetarily off of me. Yeah. And then I was thinking about it, and I was brought there by my cousin, who was brought there by her sister, my other cousin, but like she was also trafficked. Yes. So who is there to blame? Yeah. Where does it lie? Especially when like my family was we were also a support family. We had like everybody has family issues. So like it's so ingrained in the family, you don't know. I think that's probably why I was so quick to say, oh yeah, I don't care, I'll go work there too. Whatever. But I mean, I did start talking about it, and I talk about it a lot now. I didn't even realize it, so I was like, wait a minute. I remember it was like one day I was just making my bed, something really stupid, and I was waking up, and I was like, wait a minute. And I remember I called the court, and I was like, Alicia, did you realize that I was trafficked? She's like, yeah. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? She's like, well, I wanted you to realize it on your own, because I know you don't listen to me when I tell you things. I'm glad that you said that, but, like, I wonder how often it happens, and it's not even accounted for or realized, or,
It's largely unaccounted for.
I'm sure.
Largely.
And, I consider myself fortunate enough that I was able to do it, go back into it, and I still love sex work. I still love a lot of my sex worker friends. I love my clientele. I love, the business itself. I love people. I love people's stories. I took something good out of it, and I'm one of the few, I think, that would go back into it. But you never know. You never know. There's so, like, I was surprised by how many people I met after I became face out. They were like, oh, I've done that, or I've done this, or how many of us have done some sort of sex work on a sliding scale. Nobody really realized. At some point, and we always joke and say that, marriage is the most expensive sex worker anyway. But, in some sense, like, you could kind of look, and I don't want to say that about everybody, but, something's been done. Everybody's not such a pristine angel. I can't believe you do that. Why would you ever do that? Why are you selling your body, kind of thing? When you're like, oh, well, really, you were doing it a couple years ago with this or that. Like, it's, again, the stereotypes and the horrible, outlook on everything. And I think it just needs to be changed, where we need to look out for each other. We need to be, I don't even know how to explain it, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
where it's like, like the discourse and everything, this needs to happen. People need to realize, it's so common. It is so common.
It's super common.
That's why, talk about it.
Talk about it. Preach.
Right. It still doesn't make it any better, and it doesn't make it go away, but maybe it'll help you. It'll help you heal. It'll help somebody else.
Absolutely.
That's all you can hope for.
Totally. Like, thank you again for coming onto the show and sharing your story with us today, Brandi. I really do appreciate it. It shows just how commonplace things are when it comes to trafficking, how normalized it can be, or like at least it can be a facade as well. And like, you were so brave for coming out with your story as well. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate the time that you've taken to come chat with me and talk to the audience about your story with trafficking. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome finally meeting you.
Yes, absolutely. But before I let you go, where can we find you if you want to be found?
Well, I am everywhere under my name, Brandi Wood. I'm on Twitter under I think it's THEE, Brandi, yes. Brandi Wood, and I have a backup for THE, so it'll lead you to the right one. I don't remember which one's which.
Awesome.
And I'm just there. I'm on hiatus right now. I just had surgery in August, so I'm kind of
recovering,
winging it right now because I'm not able to work, which sucks because I've never not been able to take care of myself. But so I'm always on the talking shit to people. So we can find me there.
Perfect. And do you have, and I know you mentioned some resources earlier in the show. Did you want to shout out any resources that I could plug into the show notes as well?
I was trying to get like across at least the country, my country ones, but I only know, other than SWAP, which is in every state as far as I know.
Okay.
Sex Worker Outreach Program. And then there's Sex Work Aid Vegas.
Okay.
Her name is Summer. I'm going to link her to you when we hang out because she is wonderful.
Yes, send me the link.
They're born in, I can never say the name. It's like Lystrata or something like that in England. They always help out.
Okay.
But here in Buffalo, New York, there's Past People Against Trafficked Humans, Buffalo. Okay. It's a smaller, they just started it in 2020, and they have art therapy, and they have donation closets, clothing closets, doctors on site. They give you rides to your appointments, anything you could possibly need, housing help, food help.
Amazing. That's
kind of also what the International Institute that I've been talking about does also. It's the International Institute of Buffalo is what it's called.
Right.
But they also deal with refugees where Past Buffalo is specifically trafficked. Mm-hmm. I think International Institute kind of is bigger. Then they have a lot more to deal with than Past. So that one, I've been giving that number out to anybody that I see here. I'm like if you need anything, go here. They will help you. They're great. But other than that, I don't know of so many. This is
great. Yeah, we'll have all the links out in the show notes, so feel free to check it out. And that's it for today. Thank you so much, Brandi, for joining me on the show today. It's new episodes every single Sunday. Don't forget to rate, share, review, and subscribe, and maybe give me 5 ratings on Apple. I would love you for it. And thank you so much for listening and all your support out there. To whoever listens and subscribes to the show. I really, really, truly appreciate it. And we'll catch everyone in for another episode next week. Thanks, Brandi.
Thank you.
You're listening to Strip by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Artwork by Maria Bellandarama. Music by Ted D. And photography by Ian Davern.